Hello, everyone. This is Judy Maddox. I am chair of our local Sierra Club called Western North Carolina Sierra Club WNC. We used to be called Winoka. We have a website, we have a Facebook and a meetup, and please like us every way that you can like us. We also send out emails every other Saturday. Please go to our website, wncSierraclub.org, and sign up for our emails. And please join us. It would be wonderful. We have a 17 county area that we try to organize, and we love having you. Tonight's program, as you know, is the North Carolina Carbon Reduction Plan. It was just passed the end of December, about 5 weeks ago, by the North Carolina Utility Commission Plan. And tonight we are going to hear from our Sierra Club Beyond Coal, wonderful Michaela Curry, who is going to try to unpack what the Utilities Commission is saying to Duke Energy. We are a part of our Sierra Club, which is national and state chapter, and our group, as you know, is Western North Carolina. Our motto is explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. We would like to acknowledge with respect that the land that we were on today is ancestral land of the Cherokee. We thank them for protecting our forests and our environment for so many generations. I want to point out to you that Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan for 2043 is in its final stages. The last day or two on the Asheville Citizen Times and on the websites is presenting the maps. You please go and look at your maps if you're interested in a certain neighborhood. There are 3 more in-person opportunities where you can go tomorrow to East Library, February 7th to North, February 10th to Black Mountain from 10 to 5:45 and give your input. You can also go on the website, which is buncombecounty.org. Very simple to view the plan, look at the maps, and give any input. They are dividing it by density and by corridors, and their focus is to balance development in terms of affordable people of middle income and to protect historically valuable and vulnerable neighborhoods. So please, this is one of your last opportunities to be involved. Our next program, which is the first Thursday of the month, next month, March 2nd, again at 7 p.m., will be about pollinators. And our own Bee Cities, Phyllis Stiles, will be updating us on the state of pollination and pollinators and how we can garden to help protect our little guys and bring them into our lives, back into our lives. We've been very concerned about that. And now I want to present Michaela Curry, who is our campaign representative for North Carolina and South Carolina from the National Beyond Coal. She is a political public writer. She's an environmentalist. She has a degree in biological sciences, and she's done a lot with Central Appalachia and the United States South. So please hold your questions, put them in the chat. I will present them to Michaela. We are recording this program. If you miss it or parts of it, if you know other folks who are missing it, it will be posted online on our website, WNC Sierra Club, within the next few days. So please look at it. And Michaela, welcome. Please share your screen and please help us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that introduction and y'all having me here tonight. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great. Yeah, so I am also in Western North Carolina. I'm a little closer to Boone. I'm calling in from the land of the Eastern Cherokee and the Catawba people. Yeah, so I'm gonna jump into talking about the state of North Carolina's carbon plan. I'm sure there may be some things I leave out because it was a long process and is a big plan, but I'll do my best to try to cover everything. It was issued on December 30th by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. Just to give a little background, and some of these things I'm going over, I'm sure some of y'all are already familiar with, but others might not be. So in 2021, the General Assembly passed House Bill 951, which directed the Utilities Commission to adopt a carbon plan that would reduce carbon dioxide emissions from electricity generation 70% below 2005 levels by 2030, and to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. So obviously that is a big order. What happened next was the Utility Commission passed the responsibility to Duke to conduct 3 major stakeholder meetings and other conversations to get input and then to submit a proposed plan. So Duke held 3 stakeholder meetings last year, one each in January, February, and March of 2022. And they also hosted 3 technical subgroup meetings. Then in May, Duke filed their proposed plan with the Utilities Commission. So in that plan, it suggested 4 discrete portfolios. But of the 4 portfolios that Duke proposed to the Utilities Commission, only one of those actually met the target that was set by House Bill 951. To review some of the things that happened in this process, there were intervening parties who filed responses to what Duke proposed. Most of those parties filed in July of last year. And at the same time, the Utility Commission held 6 public hearings. Many of y'all may have attended some of these. There was one in Asheville, one in Charlotte, one in Raleigh, and one in Wilmington. And then there were also 2 virtual hearings. There was about 140 people who testified at those hearings that happened in July and August of last year. So the Utility Commission received almost 500 comments from interested members of the public. And the Utility Commission had a 3-week-long expert witness hearing in Raleigh that started in September of last year. There was 4 local governments also who intervened, including the city of Asheville, who was a co-intervener with Buncombe County. The Sierra Club was also an intervener. One thing I kind of want to note before moving any further is I want to talk a little bit about the stakeholder process that happened. So Duke was instructed by the Utilities Commission to engage with environmental justice stakeholders. And what ultimately ended up happening is Duke had a meeting in early May, less than 2 weeks before it submitted its plan to the Utility Commission, with less than 15 stakeholders from across the state that were selected by Duke. To kind of back up to the process that I talked about when Duke was holding these stakeholder meetings in January and February and March of last year. After each of the stakeholder meetings, there were these conferences that happened where Duke came to the Utility Commission and updated them on how the process was going, and parties could talk about the sufficiency of the process. And I think it's worth noting, if you review those transcripts, there was no mention of environmental justice in any of those meetings. In the public hearing that happened in Wilmington, and you can, if you're interested in these kinds of things, you can go back and watch the recording, or you can read the transcripts. They're all available on the docket on the Utility Commission's website. I'm happy to share that with anyone who's interested. But a witness at that hearing testified specifically that Duke's environmental justice outreach about the carbon plan had been inadequate, and shared experience of essentially offering Duke feedback after the meeting and being told that it was really too late to incorporate that feedback into the plan. So to talk more about the process of what happened. So there was an expert witness testimony and exhibits from an intervening parties. And so Sierra Club, we were an intervener in the process. So we were represented by the Southern Environmental Law Center, along with the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, the National Resources Defense Council, NRDC, and the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association. Together, we were known as the Clean Interveners. And one of the things that we did is we jointly retained Synapse Energy Economics to perform our own modeling, like their own modeling using the same, it's called Encompass, the same Encompass capacity, expansion, and production cost modeling. So it's the same software that Duke uses for its modeling. And from that, we filed a report called Carbon Free by 2050, Pathways to Achieving North Carolina's Power Sector Carbon Requirements at Least Cost to Ratepayers. And again, like these are all resources that are available. I'm happy to share them with anyone who's interested. Just to give you kind of a little bit of background, Synapse has years of experience reviewing integrated resource plans, including Duke's 2018 and 2020 IRP, or Integrated Resource Plan. So Synapse used modeling with the same software that's used by Duke to try to identify the most cost-effective resource pathway. And so what came out of that is what we called a no regrets pathway that showed a lot of cost savings compared to what Duke proposed, while also actually meeting the targets set by House Bill 951. So just some kind of high level updates from that report. It showed cost savings compared to what Duke's proposed between 700 million to almost 2.5 billion by 2030. And ranging from 19 to almost 25 billion by 2050 for ratepayers. The Synapse modeling did not show any new gas combined cycle or combustion units. And it showed a greater deployment of proven technologies like solar, storage, and wind, greater than what Duke proposed. It also modeled earlier retirements of coal capacity as compared to what Duke sent to the commission. And also energy efficiency savings, leading to 2% less energy required across the system. So we think about that, and many of y'all may be familiar with that, and that's by 2035, and actually 5% less by 2050. So reducing demand and being more energy efficient is also an important step in meeting these goals. And then the portfolios that were modeled met the load requirements. So they met like the energy that we would need and maintained to maintain a reliable grid across the state. So we submitted that. The people representing us, SCLC, submitted that report with the modeling and the same software. I also want to just take a minute to talk about what was not filed. So the National Renewable Energy Laboratory has been under contract with Duke Energy, and they had a two-part report that was funded by Duke under a collaborative agreement. And in the integrated resource plan that Duke filed in 2020, Duke identified that the study would inform future IRPs and planning efforts. And the key findings of that report all are connected to issues that were really central to the carbon plan and included like specific recommendations investing in solar and wind at 3 times the amount of what Duke proposed in the plans that they filed. Duke didn't mention the study in the carbon plan that it filed or in the testimony that it gave. And the report was completed in August, but was not published until October, 1 week after the conclusion of the expert witness hearing in the carbon plan. So I think it's just important to both take in like all the comments that were given by people, by stakeholders, by city and county governments, by people directly affected by these issues. And it's also equally important to think about what wasn't included. what wasn't talked about. Okay, so now we've kind of gotten a background of the process. So it took the entire year last year, from January to almost the last day of 2022. So now I'll jump into trying to walk y'all through what's actually in the order. And like I said, I mean, it's, I think, 137 pages. So there's certainly a lot that, you know, I may not get to or may not capture, but I'm trying to cover just kind of the high level points of what was in there. So first of all, I think one of the most significant things to note is the near-term action plan that the Utility Commission selected is super closely aligned with what Duke suggested when it filed its plan in May of last year. It's worth noting, though, that Duke and public staff wanted to extend the timeline of meeting these goals from 2030 to 2032. Thank you. But the commission did not agree to that. And so they did not extend that interim goal. So that's good. We're glad that that didn't happen. We're staying on track with the goal set by 951. But unfortunately, what we see in the carbon plan that the Utility Commission came out with is just a general lack of a sense of urgency in dealing with the climate of urgency that's already impacting people across North Carolina. And then most of, you know, having really significant impact to the elderly, to the low income, and people who testified to that, people of color, people in environmental justice communities, people who took time out of their day, almost, you know, submitted comments, hundreds of people who tried to have their voices heard by the Utility Commission. And so many of those comments were focused on the urgency of the moment. And there's just not that same sense of urgency reflected in the decisions. So I'm going to kind of just walk it through just kind of categorically. I'm going to start with coal just because I am a representative of the Beyond Coal campaign. So, and also as I walk through some of the decisions, you might see in parentheses, like we recommended, or those are referring to the Synapse modeling that we filed. So coal retirement, the Utility Commission accepted what Duke had, the retirement schedule that Duke had proposed as reasonable, which does require the retirement of 3.5 gigs of coal. We had recommended that Duke accelerate the retirement of remaining coal units to 2030 or earlier, because the plan as it is leaves, oh gosh, 5, 6, 7 coal units running until, I think Blues Creek will run until like 2036 in the given plan. And in that May plan last year that Duke filed with the Utility Commission, Duke itself says in the plan, coal is an increasingly risky fuel source. The company's remaining coal facilities are nearing the end of their technical and economic life and becoming riskier to operate. Thus, retirement is increasingly inevitable. And so I think it's important to note that, because I know that probably many of us either experienced directly or know folks who were impacted directly by Winter Storm Elliott that affected folks on Christmas Eve. I know people who had to cancel their family coming over, who had issues with access to water and all of those things because of the forced outages that Duke had to do. And those were directly a result of failures of coal and gas infrastructure. Also available, if you're interested in looking at it on the Utility Commission's website, you can go and watch a briefing that Duke gave to the Utility Commission, where they acknowledge that it was failures of equipment for their coal and gas facilities, and also note that solar performed as expected in that incident. So just want to highlight that the longer these coal plants are run, they're increasingly risky, and this is not news to anyone. Duke knows it as well. Okay, so moving along to gas, the Utility Commission considered Duke's requests to pursue 1,200 megawatts and of CCs and 800 megawatts of CTs as reasonable for planning purposes. To actually build a new gas plant, Duke will have to apply for a permit that's known as a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. So that is likely going to happen later this year, probably July or August. Duke will be filing that with the Utility Commission. And at that time, the Utility Commission will require Duke to model also the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act incentives that are being offered for clean resources like solar, wind, and batteries. So let's talk about solar. So in the carbon plan, the Utility Commission directed Duke to target 2,350 megawatts of solar in this year and next year. If you've been reading about the plan, you may see like a 3.1 gigawatt number. That actually includes the procurement that happened last year in 2020, where Duke procured 750 megawatts. So if you add that 750 to the 2,350 number, that results in the 3,100 number you may see if you've done any reading about this. We recommended in the Synapse plan for the Utility Commission to direct Duke to procure 3,250 megawatts, which with that 750 would be close to 4,000. And then the commission directed Duke to target 1,000 megawatts of standalone storage and 600 megawatts storage paired with solar. And again, that's exactly what Duke had requested. In our modeling, we recommended 4,000 megawatts total. I think it's probably worth noting, so the public staff represents the using and consuming public, and they were an intervener in the carbon plan, but they were the sole intervener, the sole entity to suggest deploying less solar than what Duke proposed. They actually recommended 470 megawatts less. It's really unclear why or what science or reasoning they're basing that off of. And I think maybe it's like also just worth flagging, especially like since they're representing the interests of the public, and so much of the public reflected a concern about the urgency of the climate crisis, that in the 167 pages of testimony and documents that public staff filed in the legal proceeding, there's not one mention of climate. Climate's not mentioned one time in 167 pages. So I do think it's really confusing to me to really try to understand why public staff suggested less solar, because really one of the biggest failures in this plan is that the commission didn't order the amount of renewables that Duke needs to procure in order for us to actually meet the 2030 compliance date. So even though the Utility Commission didn't postpone it to 2032, some of the decisions that they made or didn't make, ways they didn't direct Duke, will make it really more difficult to actually achieve meeting that goal. All right, staying with renewables, I'm going to go through what they ordered, the Utility Commission ordered on wind. So onshore wind is likely one of the lowest cost resources available. But unfortunately, the Utility Commission did not really take action to take advantage of this resource. So instead of directing Duke to do a request for proposals or an RFP, which is what many interveners, not just us, recommended, the Utility Commission directed Duke to engage with onshore wind stakeholders. So I think one of the things that's really important is we really need the Utility Commission to give metrics to Duke, so that there's accountability for how to achieve the things that they're asking Duke to achieve. And so just engaging with stakeholders is not a concrete step and has no metric attached to it. We had wanted Duke to hold an RFP for 600 megawatts of onshore wind. And the plan also directs Duke to evaluate 3 leased offshore wind energy areas. But again, it doesn't order any explicit deployments and doesn't set a path that complies with the Governor Cooper's Executive Order 218, which sets goals of offshore wind by 2030 and 2040. So again, just I think one of the biggest failures in the order is just the amount of renewables that Duke is directed or not directed to procure, because those renewables are what is going to get us to meeting the target. And the thing also is like wind often or typically blows at night, so it's a really good complementary resource for solar, which obviously is mostly during the day. And so hopefully in the next iteration, in the next decision that the commission makes, they'll do a better job of actually setting like the targets and goals and metrics that we really need them to set to achieve the goals. Okay, moving along to energy efficiency. And so again, the Utility Commission accepted what Duke suggested, a goal of 1% as reasonable, and they directed Duke to pursue an aspirational goal of 1.5% of eligible retail savings. In our planning, in our modeling, we recommend a goal of 1.5% of total sales. But again, it's really unclear how to hold Duke accountable to pursuing an aspirational goal without having a metric attached to it. And the commission didn't set any mandatory carve out for low income energy efficiency in the goals, and they didn't set a required level of spending on energy efficiency for low income households. And I think it's just worth noting that more than 500,000 households served by Duke experience an ongoing struggle to afford their electric bills. Almost 1 million households, 32% of Duke's residential accounts qualify as low income. So I also think for those of y'all in Asheville and Buncombe County, I think Asheville and Buncombe County argued that the E targets should be higher, as did many other interveners. And I don't know about y'all, but I think many of us can understand the experience and difficulty of affording electric bills. And it's a really significant issue. I mean, there's people who are facing having to choose between food and electricity, or between medication and electricity. So this is a really big deal, and we really need the Utility Commission to set some stronger metrics and more specific metrics for being able to address energy efficiency in a meaningful way. And then I think I'd be remiss if I didn't also just touch on some of the false promises in the order. So Duke suggests, and the commission largely accepts, reliance on technologies that are really speculative and they're not available now, even if they'll ever be available. And so these include a broad range of things, but a nuclear reactor, small modular nuclear reactors and hydrogen. And holding out hope for these technologies instead of actually deploying renewables and storage, which we have on the market, which we know works, is imprudent. And I really think that in future planning, we need to ask and find a way for the Utility Commission to call on Duke to invest in technology that's available now, that we know works, and not to put off hoping that these things are going to work down the line. So, meeting the mandate. Does the carbon plan get us there? I don't know that the near-term action plan that Duke put forward and the Utility Commission endorsed is what we need to get us there. We probably only have one more plan. The decisions that are going to be made in the 2024 plan are likely going to determine whether we meet the 2030 goal. I thought I heard someone say something. Okay. So what's next? Oh, excuse me. Oh. Let me go back one. Sorry, I'm having a little difficulty with my. There we go. So House Bill 951 calls for the carbon plan to be updated every 2 years. And the order combines this new carbon plan update with the pre-existing long-term planning process that was known as the Integrated Resource Plan, or the IRP, into this new process called the CPIRP, CPIRP. I don't know how exactly it's going to be referred to. But the Utility Commission's instructed Duke to propose a new plan by September 1st of this year. And then there's going to be another opportunity for legal intervention and stakeholder input. And then the Utility Commission is going to issue a new carbon plan by December 31st, 2024. And so it's going to be really important. It's going to be really critical that the Utility Commission kind of course correct some of the things that we've already talked about, as far as really investing in available technology, investing in solar, investing in wind, actually like setting metrics for Duke to achieve these goals, energy efficiency. And so there's going to be an opportunity for engagement. The commission directed Duke to develop targeted engagement plans for impacted communities, and to enact those plans in the near term, and then to report to the commission on the plans and engagement with stakeholders in its filing. Again, I think that given the feedback, especially around the environmental justice stakeholder process, not setting any metrics or measures of accountability for Duke for stakeholder engagement is a failure, because Duke has kind of already shown that they're not engaging stakeholders in a meaningful way. And so to set them on course to do the same thing without giving them metrics or parameters to show how they're meeting those goals or amending the things that they did before, really just kind of sets up the same process to happen again and again, and for people's voices to not be heard. So hopefully there'll be opportunities for folks to engage and ask the Utility Commission to set metrics and accountability for Duke for how they're engaging with stakeholders and how they're incorporating that engagement and the feedback that they get from people in a meaningful way, and for the Utility Commission to do that as well, because people showed up to the hearings. People, almost 500 people wrote comments, cities, all these people intervened, and for the Utility Commission to come back with a plan that's largely the same as what Duke proposed before the commission received any of that feedback, it's problematic, right? It's problematic. And I think it's really important that if you have a way to reach out about this, if you care about it, that you do reach out to the Utility Commission, that you do reach out to people that you know and try to help folks know, because I think this is an issue, as we saw, like with the blackouts, as we all know, like electricity use impacts us all. It touches all of our lives. And we need the Utility Commission to set goals and set metrics that are going to set us on the path that we need. And we also need, folks at public staff to be advocating on our behalf as the using public. I also I didn't mention this with wind, but the other thing with public staff is public staff actually objected to any near-term action on wind, which again, I'm unclear as to what they base their decisions on, but I do really think it's really important for folks to know, especially that this body is supposed to be representing our interests, and is held with a lot of weight, I think, by the Utility Commission, and they're not mentioning climate in their filing. They're proposing less solar than Duke, and they're objecting to near-term action on wind. All of those things are really, for me, and I would hope for y'all as well, really concerning. Okay, so a little bit more about stakeholder engagement. I just added this slide today because this information just came out, perfect timing. So Duke Energy's 2023 Carolinas IRP and Carbon Plan stakeholder meeting. The first one is going to be Wednesday, February 22nd. from 9 a.m. to 12:30. I am happy when I am not screen sharing anymore. I can share the links of any of these things that y'all are interested in, or follow up with folks as well. But the email that went out from Duke says that this first meeting is going to discuss the stakeholder process, provide an overview of the IRP and carbon plan process and modeling, confer with designated technical experts on the development of load forecasts and on assumptions related to grid edge resources and customer programs. So this is one opportunity to be involved in the stakeholder process. Duke is also initiating engagement with stakeholders to develop guidelines for expedited regulatory approval of customer programs and pilots for non-demand side management and energy efficiency programs that enable load reduction or load management. And there's going to be a stakeholder meeting on February 24th. From 10 a.m. to noon. It's going to be in person in Raleigh, but you also can attend it virtually. So you can email this address that's on the screen if you're interested. And I think you just identify in the email whether you want to attend in person or virtually. And then not like necessarily directly exactly the carbon plan, but definitely a result of the decisions that Duke is making. Duke Energy Progress has filed its rate increase case with the Utility Commission, and there's going to be public hearings coming up in March. And I think if you have an opportunity, if you're a Duke Energy Progress customer, there's going to be one in Waynesville. For those of y'all who are in that area, it's going to be the first one on March 6th. Impacts to ratepayers are directly a result of what Duke is doing in its planning. And a lot of folks are aware of this, but utility companies have an kind of just built-in incentive to want to build things that are like big, massive projects, because that's how they make money. And so I think it's really important for folks' voices to be heard in these rate case hearings. So if you are able to go to one of these, I would encourage you to. Though later in the year, there's going to be a Duke Energy Carolinas rate case hearing. I'm happy to share information with folks about that. And then another thing I didn't talk about on the slide related to coal, but it kind of comes up and it's really complicated, or to me, it's complicated to try to explain. But essentially in House Bill 951, there's this thing called securitization, that essentially what Duke is suggesting now is accelerating like the depreciation of its coal plants to match the dates that it's proposing retirement in the carbon plan. And that's going to have a negative impact to ratepayers because it means like more money over less time. And then at kind of the end of that process, when the coal plants are not running, there's less to securitize. So it's like very complex and it's a hard thing to explain. But essentially what Duke is doing by proposing this is trying to like minimize the profit impacts to its shareholders, by really passing those costs along to ratepayers. And that's really a crux of so much of the decisions that Duke is making. Is it is trying to achieve profits for its shareholders, and that often comes at the expense of North Carolina ratepayers. And so we really need the Utility Commission, the public staff, we really need them to be strong on our behalf, to keep Duke accountable to North Carolina ratepayers. So obviously, like there's a lot in the carbon plan and there's many things I didn't get to. So you can read the 130 pages, 37 pages yourself if you're really interested. I did want to share that Monday of this week, a coalition of clean energy and social justice organizations outlined 12 principles for a carbon plan that would make North Carolina a leader in emissions reduction and cultivate a modern, equitable, and fossil-free energy system. And the coalition had given Duke a report card when it filed its May plan last year. And then just this week on Monday, came out with a report card based on these same principles for the Utility Commission. And as you can see here, it doesn't make the grade. So I'll also share the link for this website when I'm not screen sharing anymore. But essentially, like, you can visit this website and there's a pretty comprehensive document that really breaks down each of these principles and what was found in the carbon plan. And you can kind of dig into that if you don't want to get into like the 137 pages of the carbon plan, but you're looking for a little bit more information than what I was able to share with you tonight. I would suggest that you check this out as a resource. Okay. Yeah. So I guess I'm going to stop here, try to leave some time for questions. And in a moment, I'll stop screen sharing, so that I can put in the chat some of the links that I've mentioned. And one thing I didn't get to, and it's not in this it's not in this presentation, but a report came out like at the end of last week from Energy Innovation, and it actually, like, in this report said that Duke's North Carolina coal plants are more expensive to run than building new solar. So there's just a lot of resources out there. Really identifying the path that we need to be on. And unfortunately, I think that the Utility Commission's decisions came up short of putting us on that path. And we really need to all get involved and do what we can to make sure that the 2024 plan gets us on track. So feel welcome to reach out to me. My email is here, michaela.curry@sierraclub.org. There's lots I don't know, but I'm happy to try to help you find answers or share what I do know. And yeah, I just really appreciate y'all having me here tonight. Thank you.
Michaela, that was excellent. Thank you. You have an armful of questions here, and we certainly want to ask each and every one. First of all, my answer, our website, the WNCSierraclub.org, will have a button on the right side of the homepage with anything that Michaela gives us to post in terms of all of these links or all of these access to videos or viewing, whatever you give us, Michaela, we will post on that button that will say the carbon plan. So my first question, Michaela, and then I'm followed with lots and lots of questions. Is there an appeal? I know Governor Cooper appointed some of these utility commissioners, and I guess we were expecting a lot better. But I mean, certainly you've told us lots of public involvement. But number one, can we like appeal to the next highest court? I mean, there's not a court, but I mean, can we appeal to the governor? I mean, what can we appeal to?
I think, that was, well, I'm not a lawyer, so I think one, like, that is a more lawyer question, but I think it's a little tricky because, like, if the commission had, right, like, said, oh, we're going to push the goal out to 2032, like, that would be like a fundamental thing that we could say they're not meeting the goal that's set by HB 951, right? But it's just a little harder to like pinpoint it, even though like I've walked y'all through like what these decisions are. I do think, and encourage folks to reach out to whoever you have access to, relationships with, whoever represents you, to the commission, to really flag that this is a significant issue. But as far as an appeal, like, that would happen through a legal proceeding. And like I said, I'm not a lawyer or prepared to give, legal advice.
But we can't turn to Governor Cooper, is that correct?
I'm not going to say you can't reach out to him, but
okay. Okay, question number one, how is the public staff accountable to various stakeholders, including the public?
I think that is a great question. I don't know how they're accountable. This is the website. If you want any specific information, I'm happy to share with you. I'm happy to share with you like what they filed. If you need help finding it in the docket, or like you can read through the carbon plan itself and see some of the things. If you go on their website, there's contact information. There's a phone number so you could call.
We're not seeing it, Michaela. Are you posting a website and a phone number or no? Or are you
Oh,
telling?
you know what? I sent it to Ken in a private chat by accident. Sorry about that. Here, there we go. I didn't have it set to everyone. So there's the public staff's website.
Okay, so it's https publicstaff.northcarolina.nc.gov/. Thank you, Michaela, and we will post this on our website. And there's a phone number when you pull that up.
Yeah, and
as-
I can go ahead. I mean, I have it pulled up, so I
yeah,
can share
if you
that.
would like to post
Yeah.
that as well.
If anybody wants to just go to that site right now, all you need to do is just click on that link in the chat. And then
Thank you.
it's there.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Next, can we get a copy of your slide?
Yes, I'm happy to share those.
Would you like to post that as a link on our website, or do you want people just to write to you at your email?
I can do either. If you want me to share them with you, Judy, and you want to share the slides, that's fine with me.
Okay. You certainly, if you can send it with a link that we could put on our alert button, that would be helpful as well. The energy report is being asked for. How can one get the energy report that you referred to?
Yes, let me think about that. I can share that link. Just give me a second to pull it up. Okay. Here is that. The energy innovation, the coal cost crossover. That's the actual report. If you just want to like read an article about the report, that's the one where like the headline itself is Duke Energy's coal plants more expensive to run than building new solar.
Okay. Does the Utility Commission have capable, that is technically and socially and politically capability to do their own analysis of an appropriate carbon plan without depending on Duke to make a proposal? And if they do not have a capable staff, depending on the regulated, how to make the first proposal is a cop-out. What do you know? Do they have a staff, Michaela?
And they do have staff, and they do have a license to do, it's my understanding that they have a license to do Encompass modeling, the same as Synapse did and the same as Duke did. But as far as I know, they did not do any of their own modeling. I can't speak to the capacity or like off the top of my head, the numbers of their staff. And there are a lot of dockets and things that the Utility Commission deals with beyond just the carbon plan. But yes, they do have the capability on some level of certainly doing their own modeling and that's actually in the People Power report card. That's actually like one of the principles. The first principle is that it should be the responsibility, the carbon plan should be the responsibility of the Utility Commission.
And how are you recommending the best way to contact the Utilities Committee? You've given us the public staff contact. Is that the contact for the Utilities Commission as well?
No, those are separate bodies. So the Utility Commission, I'm happy to share that website and folks can find, if you actually like, I'll post this link right here. And that's actually a contact form. If you go to this link, and you can actually just submit a statement to them. There's also mailing address, phone numbers for complaints, and other phone numbers listed on the right if you click on that page.
Michaela, you and I had talked about that you were going to present some action alerts coming up very, very shortly. It looks like they're here. Can you send talking points in general and links in general kind of as an overall, like in a letter or something that we can post as well, that
Yes.
all of these together?
Yeah, so with the sure, I can definitely do that with the things that are coming up with the stakeholder engagement opportunities for the carbon plan. And then also probably in mid-February, I'll be sending an email out to all Sierra Club members, and I'm also happy to share that with the Western North Carolina group, that will have some talking points about the Duke Energy Progress rate case, some information for folks about those hearings.
Great, and we certainly will post that on our website, your recommendations. Next question, who or what is public staff, and where do the salaries come from?
Well, they're an office of the North Carolina government. So they're the public staff of the North Carolina Utility Commissions. So they're an independent agency that was created by legislation in 1977 to review and investigate and make recommendations to the Utility Commission with respect to reasonable rates and adequacy of service, and assuring an adequate energy supply to protect public health and safety. So you can go on the website that I shared before. I can share this link if you want to know more about the public staff and who the actual staff members are of that office.
Okay, and if you could incorporate that in this entire letter that you're sending as well. I mean, certainly post it right now. You've had person after person here in chat say they want to get involved. They want to get involved in the stakeholders meetings, and they certainly want to know how to contact.
I'm glad. We need everybody to get involved. This is really important. And I just really appreciate all of y'all that care about this and want to get involved. And it's urgent and affects all of us. And yeah, just a lot of appreciation. I'm happy to share any resources that help support folks to get.
So would you say the public staff or the Utilities Commission are higher priority or equal, or what would you recommend?
I think equal priority in different ways, right? Because the Utility Commission is the one who is making the decision, but they are heavily weighing in what public staff contributes, because the public staff is supposed to be advocating for the public interest. And so, you know, when like solar, for instance, right? Like you've got Duke, what Duke's proposed, and then you've got public staff proposing less than Duke, and then you've got us and other interveners proposing more. It kind of sets it lowers the scale, right? And kind of distorts it so that when the Utility Commission is trying to consider all the perspectives, and it's like supposed to really consider public staff and that information, it's really impacting their decisions. So they really go hand in hand.
Do you have a take as to why the Utilities Commission rules so poorly?
I find it very confusing. I find it disappointing. I can't speak to the why of it. I think only the utility commissioners can know what they base their decisions on, how they were influenced to make those decisions, and like what they considered. I just know that from my perspective, it's confusing to try to understand why they made some of the decisions that they made.
What measures were included in the plan to reduce methane emissions? And someone answered that saying that House Bill 951 only addressed carbon dioxide and no attention at all to methane. Can you comment?
That's correct. Yeah, if you also look at the People Power report card, that's also one of the principles listed there. Is that wasn't considered. And so legally, the Utility Commission was not directed by HB 951 to consider methane. However, methane is a form of carbon. It's CH4, it's a simple hydrocarbon, and it's an extremely powerful greenhouse gas. So while technically the carbon plan, the Utility Commission was not failing any directive set by House Bill 951, in understanding the actual like urgency of the crisis and the impacts of methane, not addressing or curtailing methane doesn't address the actual issue that underlies why House Bill 951 legislation was put in place.
Just to comment, the non-viability of fossil fuel hurts the stock owners themselves. The non-disclosure to the stock owners about the future non-viability of oil is what gave traction to the Exxon Mobil lawsuits. I mean, just a comment. Someone else commented, I recently moved to Asheville from Maryland, which has a very progressive energy climate plan. I suggest North Carolina to go more on the offensive by pointing out how expensive each of the recent storms have been, and that delaying reaching a plan goal will greatly add to financial and human cost and push for more Democrats to be elected. So lots and lots of congratulations, Michaela. Really appreciated your wonderful question. Any public staff former employees of Duke and vice versa? Is the revolving door here?
Can I speak to that, please? In the statement before, I said that I could speak to the public staff versus commissioners, I believe. I'm an attorney and I've studied administrative law. It's not my area of practice, but the public staff would be the equivalent in my head to a court clerk. So the clerk is going to be working for a court of appeals judge, for example, and they're going to do all this research and they're going to read all of the comments. They're going to read everything. And then they're going to come up with what their strategy is on the holding of the court and the wording of everything. And so that's how I'm perceiving the public staff to be. They're not employees of Duke, they're employees of the state, probably. And I might, if anybody on here knows if I'm right or wrong, please chime in. But it seems to me public staff means that they work for the government, they work for the Public Utilities Commission. And they're the ones that are giving as much information as they can to the commissioners.
Yeah, the public staff are state employees. I think what this person's question was is, are people who are working for public staff people who formerly worked for Duke? Or do people who work for public staff go on to work for Duke? I think is what this question was asking, and I don't know that. I mean, if others do, you're welcome to answer, but that's not something that I personally know. And I do see this other question about the meeting on March 6th. Yes, so that meeting in Waynesville is just about the Duke Energy Progress rate case. It is not a hearing on the carbon plan. However, the decisions that Duke is making, what it chooses to build and invest in, those costs get passed along to ratepayers. And so while it is just to talk about the 3-year rate plan that Duke Energy Progress has filed, it's also not in a vacuum independent of the carbon plan, because all of these things are interconnected, if that makes sense. And I will be glad to provide like more information for folks for understanding the rate case and what Duke is proposing. Just don't have those resources available yet, but we'll have them and be glad to share in advance of those stakeholder meetings.
And one last question, Michaela, can you give a brief overview of the authority of the Utility Commission with respect to electric rates and investments, and how often are rate cases required? And does the commission control investments and plans with respect to electric generation?
Well, this is a really big question. I'm happy to talk about this with folks. I also, though, like we are a few minutes over time. So I would just also direct folks who really want to understand more about what the Utility Commission is and what they do, to go to the website. It's ncuc.gov. But I'm happy to share just like kind of a few high level things. So like the Utility Commission regulates investor owned electric companies. So rates, charges, meter billing accuracy, reliability of service, quality of service, the need for power plants, power lines, routes for power lines, conservation and renewable energy programs, people who are resellers of electricity, disconnection of service, and renewable energy facilities. So like, for instance, when Duke says that they need to build new methane gas facilities, they have to come to the Utility Commission and they have to file this certificate of public convenience and necessity and essentially make the case to the Utility Commission of why it's like a reasonable and prudent investment for them. And then the Utility Commission makes the decisions to whether to approve or modify or adjust what Duke is proposing. And so they come out with these orders. So that's what happened in this case. It was a little, it's based on legislation, but Duke proposed things and then the commission came out with an order. And I, again, could get kind of deep into the weeds, and I'm happy to provide more resources to folks, but there's also you can go onto the Utility Commission website, and there's a whole About Us section that talks about what the Utility Commission is, what they regulate, who the commissioners are, laws and regulations, frequently asked questions, all of that. And again, I'm going to put my email in here, and you're welcome. Folks are welcome to email me.
And Michaela, once again, thank you. Thank you after thank you after thank you in the chat. So thank you. And please send a whole compilation that we will post on our website as soon as it comes on the homepage on the right, with a button labeled the carbon plan. So I want to thank everyone for joining. I want to invite you back a month from now, the first Thursday of March, March 2nd at 7 p.m. Please go to our website for the advanced registration link. It will be on pollinators and what we can do to help them and bring them back and garden for them. So please, all of you, come back. And thank you, Michaela. Everybody have a good night. Appreciate it.
Thank you.